My husband's ex made him believe that I was pregnant with my stepbrother's child, but after 10 years, he wants his child back. I used to believe trust was the foundation of love, that when you married someone, you built a life on a promise to believe in each other, to fight for each other, to never doubt each other. I was so wrong. I thought I married my soulmate. I thought we were unbreakable. I thought we had something that no one could tear apart. But all it took was one lie. One perfectly placed, well-crafted deception that shattered everything. And the worst part? The person who destroyed my marriage didn't even want my husband back. She just wanted to watch me lose. I was 24 when I met him. I had just moved to a new city, chasing a fresh start. I didn't have family nearby. I didn't have a support system. I was alone. Then, I met Nathan. He was everything I thought I wanted. Charming. Protective. The kind of man who could make an entire room turn their heads when he walked in. And for a while, I thought I was the luckiest woman alive. Until I met her. His ex. Her name was Riley. She was always there. Calling at random hours. Showing up at events uninvited. Finding reasons to keep herself in his life. And every time I questioned it, Nathan had the same answer. She's just a friend. We have history, that's all. She's not a threat, babe. I only love you. I believed him. I was naive. So I let it slide. I let her slide. And I let my guard down. That was my biggest mistake. The night I told Nathan I was pregnant, I expected him to be happy. I imagined him pulling me into his arms, kissing me, telling me we were going to be a family. Instead, he took a step back, and his entire face changed, like I had just confessed to a crime. Then, he whispered something that made my stomach drop. She said this would happen. I blinked. I laughed. Who? What are you talking about? He wouldn't look at me. His jaw clenched. I should have listened to her. I froze. Listened to who? And when he finally said it, I felt sick. Riley. I didn't understand. Not at first. Not until he sat me down and told me what she had done. She had convinced him I was cheating. She had planted doubts in his head for months. She told him I was sleeping with someone else. But not just anyone else. She told him I was having an affair with my stepbrother. I stared at him, horrified, disgusted. Do you even hear yourself? I choked out. She showed me proof, he snapped. Messages. Pictures. She said she didn't want to tell me, but she had to. That you were playing me. My entire body went cold. Did you ever think to ask me? Silence. And that was the moment I knew. He had already made up his mind. He gave me two choices. Terminate the pregnancy, or divorce him. I begged him to listen to reason. I offered a paternity test. I showed him medical records proving my conception date. I swore on everything I loved that I had never betrayed him. But none of it mattered, because Riley had gotten to him first. She had planted the poison, and he had swallowed it whole. I left, packed my bags, walked out the door, never looked back. And when our divorce papers came through, he signed them without a second thought. No apology, no regret, not even a hint of doubt, because in his mind, he had been right, and I was just a mistake. I lost the baby 3 months later. Stress, grief, an overwhelming, crushing heartbreak that my body couldn't handle. I never told Nathan. I never told anyone. I just buried it deep inside me and tried to move forward. New city, new life, new husband who actually loved me. I thought I had escaped my past. But a decade later, Nathan found me, and when I read his message, I nearly dropped my phone, because after all these years, he wanted to see his child, the child he had abandoned, the child that didn't exist. I sat on my couch, staring at my phone, rereading the message over and over again. Nathan, after 10 years of silence, suddenly asking to see a child that didn't exist. I wanted to feel rage. I wanted to feel hatred, but all I felt was disgust. Because the man who had thrown me away like garbage now wanted to play the loving father? The man who had told me to terminate my pregnancy or leave now wanted to meet his child. I clenched my jaw, because he was about to learn the truth. And this time, he wouldn't be the one walking away. I didn't reply right away. I took my time. Let him wait. Let him wonder. Let him feel even an ounce of the uncertainty and pain he had once made me feel. Then, I sent a message. Where are you? His response came instantly. In town. Can we meet? I smirked. Sure, because after a decade of lies, betrayal, and abandonment, It was finally my turn to watch him break. The cafe was nearly empty when I arrived. And there he was. Older. More tired looking. Still with that fake charm I once fell for. When he saw me, his entire face changed. "Wow," he breathed. "You look good." I slid into the chair across from him, folding my hands. "You wanted to see me," I said, my voice flat. "Why now?" He exhaled sharply. I don't even know where to start. I didn't speak. I just waited. Because this was his mess. And I wanted to watch him try to clean it up. "I was wrong," he admitted, voice low. I tilted my head. "About what?" His hands curled into fists. "About everything." I smirked. "That's funny," I said. "Because back then, you were so sure." He winced. "I know. I was an idiot." "No," I corrected. "You were a coward." Silence. For the first time, he didn't try to argue. Didn't try to justify himself. Didn't try to make me feel like I was the problem. Because after 10 years, he had finally seen the truth. "I should have listened to you," he whispered. I let out a bitter laugh. "You should have done a lot of things." His jaw tightened. "Can I see them?" I froze. It took me a second to process. Then, I laughed. A cold, bitter laugh. Because this was hilarious. "See who?" I asked, tilting my head. His eyes softened. "Our child." I bit my lip. Because this was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment he would finally feel the pain I had carried for so long. I leaned forward, and in the coldest voice I had ever used, I whispered, "There is no child." His face went pale. His lips parted slightly, like his brain couldn't process what I had just said. What?" I exhaled slowly. "The baby," I said, staring directly into his soul. "The one you threw me away over? The one you refused to acknowledge? The one you let her convince you wasn't yours?" Silence. I could hear his breath shaking. She didn't make it. For a second, I thought he might pass out. His hands trembled. His throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. "But I thought." "You thought what?" I snapped. "You thought you could just walk back into my life? Meet the child you abandoned? Play the good father after a decade of silence?" His eyes watered. But I didn't feel pity. Because this was his doing. He had made his choice. And now, he had to live with it. "I didn't know," he whispered. I clenched my jaw. "No, you didn't want to know." Silence. The kind that made my blood boil. I stood up, grabbing my bag. "Wait, please," he choked. I turned to look at him one last time. And then, I dropped the final bomb. "You chose her over me." His breath hitched. "You threw me away." Tears welled up in his eyes. "You never even asked if I was okay." He opened his mouth. But I cut him off. "I hope she was worth it." Then, I walked away. And this time, I never looked back. The next morning, I got another message. From her. The woman who had destroyed my marriage. And what she had to say made my blood run cold. Because after all these years, after ruining my life, she had one last confession to make. And this time, it was about him. I should have ignored it. I should have deleted the message the second I saw her name pop up on my screen. But I didn't. Because something inside me whispered, "Read it." And when I did, I realized she wasn't just reaching out. She was falling apart. And the confession she was about to make would change everything. "I know you have no reason to believe me." That was the first line of her message. "But I need to tell you the truth. I need you to know why I did what I did." I rolled my eyes. Because now she wanted to explain? After all these years? After she had stolen everything from me? But I kept reading. Because if there was one thing I had learned, it was that people like her don't come back unless they're desperate. And Riley? She was drowning. I lied. I exhaled sharply. No surprise there. I made everything up. The affair. The messages. The pictures. I faked it all. I clenched my jaw. Because hearing her say it out loud. After a decade of knowing it was a lie, after watching my life burn because of it, it still made my blood boil. But I wasn't ready for the next part. Because this was the real reason she did it. But I didn't do it because I wanted him back. I froze. "What?" "I didn't destroy your marriage because I was still in love with him." I stared at the screen, my hands tightening around my phone. Because I had always assumed that was the reason. That she had been some pathetic, obsessed ex who couldn't stand seeing him happy with someone else. But no, that wasn't it at all. And what she said next shattered everything I thought I knew. "I did it because I was jealous of you." My stomach twisted. "Not because you had him, but because he loved you more than he ever loved me." I felt my breath hitch. Because suddenly it all made sense. She hadn't destroyed my life to get him back. She had destroyed it because she couldn't stand knowing she was never enough. Because the entire time they were together, he had never looked at her the way he had looked at me. And that had driven her insane. I thought if I got rid of you, he'd come back to me, that he'd realize I was the one he was supposed to be with. But he didn't. He never looked at me the way he looked at you. He never wanted me back. And that's when I realized I hadn't ruined your life. I had ruined his. I leaned back, gripping my phone tightly. Because this was poetic. She had plotted against me, destroyed my marriage, turned my husband against me. But in the end, she had gained nothing. And I had everything. She kept messaging. Long, desperate paragraphs about how she hated herself for what she had done, how she had spent years regretting it, how she wished she could go back and undo everything. But I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel hatred. I didn't even feel anger. I just felt done. I typed out a response. Short, simple, final. I already knew. I could feel her relief from across the screen until I sent the next message. But I don't think about you at all. Blocked. Gone. Forever. That was it. The last connection to my past. The last reminder of the pain they caused me. And I had finally put it all away. I walked outside, breathing in the fresh air. For the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying any of it anymore. No more anger. No more resentment. No more traces of them in my life. I had closed the door on my past. And nothing would ever drag me back. But then, a few days later, I got one last message from Nathan, and what he had to say made my blood run cold. Because for the first time in his life, he was begging. I thought I was done. His ex had confessed. I had cut her out of my life. I had moved on. But then, Nathan reached out again. And this time, he wasn't angry. He wasn't cold. He wasn't trying to convince me that he had been right all along. He was begging. I saw his name on my screen and almost laughed. Because after all these years, after all the pain, the heartbreak, the way he had discarded me without a second thought, now he wanted to talk. Now he had something to say. Now he wanted to fix what could never be fixed. I let it go to voicemail. Because whatever pathetic excuse he had, I wasn't about to give him the satisfaction of hearing my voice. But later that night, curiosity got the best of me. And when I finally listened to his message, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Hey, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from. His voice cracked. But I need to say I'm sorry. I rolled my eyes. 10 years too late. But he wasn't done. I found out what she did. About the lies. About everything. And a deep sigh, like he was holding back tears. I don't know how to live with this. I smirked. Because that was the thing about people like him. They don't care until it's too late. The next day, another voicemail. And this time, it was worse. I keep thinking about that night. The night you told me you were pregnant. And his voice broke. I was so cruel. I didn't even ask if you were okay. I didn't ask if you were scared. He stopped. Like he couldn't even bring himself to say it. But I knew what he meant. He hadn't just walked away. He had shattered me. And now, it was finally hitting him. Another pause. Then, I lost everything. I leaned back, gripping my phone tightly. I spent years thinking I had done the right thing. That I had dodged a bullet. That I had walked away from a liar. But I was the fool. He sniffled. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. And I threw you away. I closed my eyes. Not because I felt bad for him, but because for the first time, I didn't feel anything at all. His regret? His guilt? His suffering? Not my problem. A week later, I got one last message. This time, it wasn't a voicemail. It was a text. Short, simple, and final. I hope you're happy. I hope you have everything you ever wanted. I stared at it for a moment. Then, I deleted it. Because I was happy. I did have everything I ever wanted. And him? He was nothing to me now. The past had finally let me go. No more anger. No more sadness. No more what-ifs. And that night, as I curled up next to the man who had never doubted me, the man who had loved me through everything, I realized something. I had won. I was finally completely free. But then, a few days later, I got one more message. From someone else. And this time, it wasn't an apology. It wasn't regret. It was a warning. Because after everything, Nathan wasn't done yet. And the final thing he did would make my blood run cold. I thought Nathan was finally out of my life. His pathetic apologies meant nothing to me. His guilt wasn't my burden to carry. His regret came a decade too late. But then, I got another message. Not from him. From someone else. And when I read it, I felt my entire body go cold. Because after all these years, after throwing me away like I was nothing, Nathan had one last trick up his sleeve. It was my best friend, Anna, who sent the text. I don't want to freak you out, but I thought you should know. Nathan is looking for you. I frowned. What do you mean? A few seconds later, another message. He's been asking about you. Around town. With people we used to know. My stomach dropped. Because why? Why was he still holding on? Why couldn't he just let me go? I didn't respond right away. Instead, I waited. Because if there was one thing I had learned, it was that people like Nathan don't just want closure. They want control. And when they realize they've lost it, they become desperate. A few days later, it happened. I was leaving work when I saw him, standing across the street, watching me, hands stuffed into his pockets, looking smaller, weaker than I had ever seen him. And for the first time ever, like a stranger, I should have walked away. I should have ignored him. But I was done hiding. So instead, I walked straight toward him. He blinked, like he hadn't expected me to come to him first. Hey, he said. I crossed my arms. What do you want? He swallowed hard. I needed to see you. I laughed. You've seen me. Now go. His face twisted in pain. Please. I just need to talk. I shook my head. No, Nathan. You need me to listen. But I don't need anything from you. His hands trembled. I know you hate me. I tilted my head. Hate you? No, Nathan. That would mean I still care. Silence. A long, painful silence. Then, he spoke one last time. I don't know how to live with myself. I looked him right in the eyes, and I said the words that ended everything. That's not my problem. I walked away. Didn't look back. Didn't stop when he called my name. Because finally, I was free. I never heard from Nathan again. No more messages. No more voicemails. No more pathetic attempts to rewrite history. Because now, even he knew, I was gone forever. That night, I sat on my porch, sipping tea, staring at the stars. And I felt it. No anger. No pain. No traces of him in my life. For the first time in years, I was at peace. Because I had done what he never could. I had moved on. And that was the best revenge of all.